Hello, Internet! This is Leisha Sterling from Geeks Without Bounds, and we're here today with another mentorship with Mediathread. We're sitting with Mark Smythe again to go over the targets. The last two sessions that we've had, we've worked on the 25 things and how to form a target and what the importance of that is. And now we're going to narrow that target down to a single sentence and move from there into how that affects our planning. So I'm going to just jump right in here. Under agenda in the meeting notes today, I wrote down a single statement. So I don't know what your time frame is, so I left it really open. You can fix that. So over the next 6 months, year, decade, lifetime, CC and MTL will increase Mediathread use in Columbia and in other institutions by recruiting more participants to work on the project, improving support to make the tool easier to use, and recruiting users both in and out of the university. Is this a true reflection of your goal? If it's not, let's edit it.
I think it's consistent with what we said in our mission statement.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. It's actually a very good rephrasing, I would say.
Do you want to jump in?
Okay. Well, I think you could make this a little bit more concrete in your targeting here. Obviously, you're limiting yourself here to Columbia and other institutions. How many institutions are you going to be working with, other than Columbia?
Well, Columbia is the institution that basically works on Mediathread. We have partners that do contribute. Exactly how many?
Yeah, I mean, we sort of released the code openly, and some other universities have been interested enough in it that they have gone and installed local instances of it. Of those, a smaller percentage get Mediathread used in classes, but we don't really control this. I mean,
So you, it feels like you don't control it, but you do, in terms of there are lots of things that we can do. If what your intention is to get it into more institutions, then there are a number of steps we can take to help encourage more institutions to put it into place. And if that is a goal, then that's going to affect the steps that you take to recruit more users outside of Columbia, right? And yes, I know that has to do with getting outside partners who might run a Mediathread instance for other institutions. We've talked about that before. But don't worry about the how you're going to get there right now. We're going to get to that afterwards, once we know exactly whether it's part of the goal or not. If you don't care if it gets used outside the institution, then you stop worrying about whether it gets used outside the institution or not. And you just focus on, increase Mediathread use in Columbia, the end, right? I mean, not the end, but not the and other institutions. If you want it to be used in other institutions, do you have a specific goal? Do you want it to be used in all universities throughout the United States? Do you want it to be used, I think what he's trying to get at is have a target number or
even a percentage of growth. I mean, how much use do you want? If you're going to say that we're going to increase the use of this product by 15% over the next 6 months at Columbia and other institutions, or we're going to increase it by 60% at Columbia, and also increase participation at other institutions. Also, just how many institutions are you talking about? How many are in play right now? Do you know?
Okay, so I think that it will be convenient to back into quantitative numbers like this, but I mean, I think it's worth saying that we don't want to just sort of like hit numbers for their own sake. I think we have a general sense that Mediathread is improved by use outside of Columbia because that gives us more data, more information. It involves potentially more developers in the project. And so, I mean, if we could figure out a way to set a goal with that in mind rather than just a sheer number. I mean, right now I would say that, there are probably about 8 to 10 other institutions that we know of have attempted installations of the code. And of those, we're in regular communication with 1 or 2 others.
Dartmouth, MIT, and what about Georgia?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say regular communication there, but we have been in communication there. So anyway, in the 10, there's a sort of there's a scale, and our regular kind of communication about the use of Mediathread at an outside institution is limited to 1 or 2 other institutions, I'd say. Other ones have sort of hit us at a certain time and gotten going, and then we haven't followed up or haven't been able to follow up. But I'm just saying that we don't want to just artificially pick a number just because it'd be cool if 20 other institutions use Mediathread. We'd like that number, I think, to correlate to our sense that this is a good amount of use, and it's the kind of use that will improve the project and give us information that we want.
So let me counter what you're saying in that the more other institutions are using the tool, the more likely you're going to have other stakeholders contributing into not just the code base, but also your documentation, your support, your evangelism of the product outside. One of the things about open source, as you keep reinforcing, this is a very true thing about open source, that it's driven by the community, but you have to get it into sort of a critical mass of hands before that community really gels and is pushing things forward. And while a number right now may seem artificial, it gives you a sense as you're moving forward that you're reaching out to the right people. If you say specifically that you want to get into 10 more institutions, let's say, then what's holding 10 institutions back from using the tool? And since you've already had 8 to 10 institutions attempt to install, and you're pretty sure that not all of them are using it at this point because of various problems, having a sense that, okay, these are the problems that people have had putting this into use, we'd like to make sure that at least 10 institutions have functioning Mediathread instances and a growing community within their institutions. That gives you some sense of, well, we need to do these steps to make that possible. And yes, I understand what you're saying about you're just pulling a number out of the air. But that number out of the air it does help give you some guidance as you're moving along. It's really strange. I've experienced this happen just in the last couple of months, that coming up with an artificial number for growth has actually helped me, even though I have no idea if I'm going to make that artificial number or way overshoot that artificial number. Having that artificial number has helped me to gauge what I'm doing. It's like having a yardstick.
Right. Yeah. So
and having a yardstick sitting around the house doesn't mean that you're actually going to make everything that you build exactly 3 feet tall. But having a yardstick means that you have something to measure everything else against. So think of it that way. Think about this number not as, well, we have to force everything to be 3 feet tall, but that now that we have a number, we have this yardstick that we can measure actions against.
So, not to be continual pain, but I would come up with two different numbers then. If the on-ramp to installing and the consultation with faculty or instructors who are using Mediathread is as it is today, I would want the number to be small, because I feel like we would want to cultivate deeper relationships with the institutions and agree on the best ways of building those on-ramps together. So I don't know, Susan, I would say like 4 or 5 would be pretty big for us that way.
No, and I agree completely. Due to the limitations and problems right now, 5 does seem to be a pretty good number. But what's your second number?
So my second number is, if we developed in-house and we made some of that on-ramping easier, in other words, we made an installation package in some way, or we made it so that people could, run it without having sort of hand-holding. And if we built in the assignment feature, the templating, the things that we're thinking of here, to make people who are using it from the front end better oriented and in less need of sort of like advice and consultation, then I'd want more institutions, right? If the on-ramps were easier, we would want 10, 15, 20.
But I think as well, if we're going to talk about what our target is, if we're going to be installed at 5 external institutions, what does that mean? The code is installed?
Right.
That really doesn't matter.
Yeah, we've hit that already.
What is our criteria for being a successful installation at an external institution, be it an academic institution or something else, research projects and so forth?
Yeah.
So I think the 5 is a great number, but I want to qualitatively.
Yeah. Say what is 5? 5
what
of
does
what?
That mean?
Yeah, 5 of what? And I think, kind of going along the lines, 5 different institutions at which at least one active Mediathread site is being engaged in by a variety of users. There's one person sort of leading or responsible for the success of it at each of these institutions. That seems like what we would want, right? So we would have actual learning or actual scholarship happening on the front end at 5 different institutions with Mediathread. And that would grow us from 3, maybe, we would say today, into 5.
We have this dream of creating this easy-to-use installation package and having these 5 organizations will help inform those decisions as far as how we package it, what we do, how we make it easier, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and let's imagine the 5 would be also committed to really conferring with us, like not informal, like reaching out whenever they needed help, but there would be some sort of rounding up of the 5 where we would all come together and have some sort of conference or some sort of conferral point.
So let me kick this back. Which is more important to you right now? Getting Mediathread into those 5 where you have to put a lot of effort into helping them with that, or making Mediathread easier to install so that you can get it into more locations? Now, I mean, this can be a tiered thing where, over the next 6 months, what you really want to focus on is hand-holding those 5 institutions, because then you'll have more feedback so that in the following 6 months you can focus on making sure that it's easier to install the system and run the system, and you'll be able to get it into even more institutions later. On the flip side, if you're focused on hand-holding those first 5, it's going to get in the way of the available time for developing exactly those tools that's going to make it easier to use for more institutions. So which of these two things do you want to focus on right now? And there's no wrong answer. Just, you know.
Is it building the relationship and getting the thing installed, or is it about developing the on-ramp?
Right. That's the question. And I mean, I think we can talk about two different on-ramps. The installation back-end on-ramp.
Okay.
To work with authentication systems and processes and, you know, servers at other places. And then there's the front-end use on-ramp. At least from the front end, we have the idea that if we develop on the front end, we'll also be helping people at Columbia all the more. So it's sort of a virtuous. It's like a 2-for-1, right? That whatever work we do, at least on the front end, will help us here at Columbia as well as outside users. The back end on-ramp, I don't think, is the same situation. I think we would have this sort of like decision, like, are we going to develop for Columbia, or are we going to roll up our sleeves and engage and really get into the weeds about how CAS works or whatever at a different institution?
Yeah, sure.
So here's a thought on this front, that if you focus in the next 6 months in getting 5 highly engaged universities or institutions, whatever those institutions may be, where there's an actively engaged Mediathread site with a leader spearheading the care and feeding of that installation, and you plan that at the end of that 6 months there's going to be an actual conference, whether that's a virtual conference or a physical face-to-face conference, where you get together with members of those 5 institutions to then break down what do we need to do to make this more accessible to more institutions. So you basically break it down into 2 goals. The now goal, which gives us the statement for now, for this next 6 months, and then a longer-term goal, which gives us a statement for the future, basically.
So at such a conference, it would be great if all 5 of those other institutions were similarly committed to the general growth of Mediathread. I suspect what we would get in those conversations would be representations of local interests in the tool. Like, we want the tool to do this, we need the tool to do that, rather than deep engagement on the sort of the more high-level project of making the tool available and useful across different institutions. I mean, that feels like very much our problem. It'd be really, if we were to take that on, it would be interesting to see whether we could get sort of communal buy-in from the partner institutions that it's their problem too. I just imagine that the conversation would be much more about, well, you know, at Princeton, we really needed to do this, 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 and this. And, oh, yeah, really? Because at Michigan, we really needed to do that, that, and that. And
well, as we're seeing at Dartmouth, they are actively developing something for themselves.
Right.
So we're at the point now where the code base is strong enough that it can begin to support these requirements, these personal requirements that people have, as well as hopefully making the product better as we move forward. So I'm not so concerned that people come to the table with their own interests, as long as they're willing to roll up their sleeves and help out too.
right,
Yeah.
rather than act as sort of clients to some sort of centralized service.
Yeah.
Right, and also if you're planning on having a conference towards the end of the at the end of the 6 months or whatever, it can also shape where you're focused, that you're in your relationships with those 5 institutions, that in addition to helping them get this thing started, you might also be reaching out to computer science students who would help on the development within their organization to help build what you're doing. I'm thinking right now about a community like the Drupal community. A lot of people get started in the Drupal community just because they want to put up a website of their own. And next thing you know, they realize they can throw up websites for friends or small businesses in the area. Then they discover that, oh, I really need to learn how to build modules. And then the next thing you know, they're like, I'd really like to get into the internals of this. And there's sort of this conversion process of somebody who is just a user of Drupal to somebody who's actually building the next version and making security fixes on the internals. And when you're in a university environment, you sort of have an opportunity to speed that up simply by reaching out to students who can find interesting puzzles to work on within your tool. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think
I'm thinking right now about about a program at the UW where they specifically focus on human-centered design of technology, and they've got people that are working on the front part of tools, the UI and things, but they also have people who are working on deep internals and still doing that within a human-centered approach, where they're looking at what is making this tool difficult for people to use, and just exactly the kinds of problems you're talking about, getting things installed, making it run on a daily basis. The feedback that they get from a tool, from a prototype, in use is exactly what they use to build the next thing. So there are students at programs like that who would benefit from the conversation that comes up from having your 5 institutions that are having their hands held, and would be able, willing, and actually glad for the opportunity to work on building your tool out more, because that's giving them experience and possibly class projects.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, we keep saying 5. That seems like a comfortable number.
Sure.
As far as like back versus front on-ramps, and now versus then.
Well, there's a couple of different off-ramps, did you say? Or
on-ramps. On-ramps.
As far as the backend is concerned, there is straight code and server configuration and installation that I think represents sort of one issue. And then, as Mark was referencing, there's the integration, if we're talking about this, into an academic course system, which is a whole nother sort of level. I think for the purposes of this, doing some work to make the initial installation much easier, possibly through Docker or some other sort of nice technology that's just starting to be popular now, we could make this a lot easier for people. We're running into a lot of situations where the university IT folks aren't familiar with our stack, and they're having difficulties even just understanding Python. And we're having to hold their hands quite a lot to get them through that server configuration. So I think as part of or in advance of getting these 5 people in place, we need to do some work on the setup, the initial setup.
So that goes in the now.
That goes in the now, I think.
Okay, so let me come back up here to this pull down statement. I'm gonna start sort of another copy of it that we can. So over the next 6 months, CCNMTL, whatever the heck that stands for. I just pulled it out of your mission statement.
You want to know?
Yeah.
It's the Columbia Center for New Media Teaching and Learning.
Aha.
Okay.
Doesn't it?
So the Columbia Center for New Media Teaching and Learning will increase Mediathread use in Columbia by
And 5 other institutions, I think it is.
and 5 other institutions.
By
Improving the installation on-ramp.
Yeah,
Work,
it doesn't really have much to do with increasing use at Columbia, but that does address the 5 other
the
institutions.
5 others, yeah.
Yeah.
Working closely with admins and users, or maybe I should just say stakeholders, because that kind of covers everybody, your internal stakeholders and the kinds of stakeholders outside. Through planning a so I've been throwing around this idea of a conference. I don't know if you guys want to plan a conference or some other sort of a
do it as a hackathon.
Actually, yeah, that's not a bad idea. We could totally help you with a hackathon. Planning an event at the end of this period to discuss future collaborative work in the Mediathread community.
Now, okay. Now, let me ask you, do you want these collaborations to give you additional programmers to actually work on the software that is Mediathread, or are you just looking for them to give you feedback into what kinds of dials and switches and gizmos that you want on Mediathread, or stuff on customizing it for their particular institutions? Are you looking for them just for feedback on how to make it better, or are you actually looking for them to be active participants in the programming? And
I can answer that. We definitely want them to be active participants in developing it. In order for it to be a healthy open source community, it needs to be, like, the developer community really needs to go beyond Columbia in order to have a really healthy open source ecosystem that's going to go beyond the university.
She right?
Do you guys agree?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. So we should probably say that you want them to be active participants in the programming, not
Okay.
not just users.
Closely with stakeholders and recruiting active developers into the that just the words, somehow that statement, like, it has all the pieces of the things that I wanted to say, but the way that I put the sentence together ended up making the sentence completely blah. But okay, so over the next 6 months, CCNMTL will increase Mediathread use in Columbia and 5 other institutions by improving the installation on-ramp, working closely with stakeholders, planning an event. How about this? And planning an event at the end of this period to involve stakeholders stakeholders directly in future collaborative development. How's that?
Sounds good. We just need to find those stakeholders.
Right. So that's part of why we have this statement, is because we want to. Now we know we need stakeholders in 5 other institutions.
I was planning an event at the end of this period to find and
Sorry?
it says you're working closely with stakeholders. Basically, you should be finding and working closely with stakeholders. Put it in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Finding and working closely with stakeholders.
Now, do you want to do anything with the user on-ramp in the next 6 months? Make it easier to get up to speed on it, or
Yeah,
like a training program,
or is that too much to shove into 6 months?
Well, we already have plans on doing that. So, yeah, I mean, we can include that in.
pop it in there. It's one of your targets.
Okay. Improving the installation on-ramp. How do we want to word this? Improving the user experience?
On-ramp.
User orientation, initial orientation, or something like that. Which is a little bit more directed rather than experience. I mean, it's the problem of a brand new user who does not have somebody showing them how to use the tool, confronted with it for the first time, making sense of it. Because it's complex, as we've discussed.
Okay. So here we go. Over the next 6 months, CCN MTL will increase Mediathread use in Columbia and 5 other institutions by improving the installation on-ramp, improving the initial user orientation to the software, finding and working closely with stakeholders, and planning an event at the end of this period to involve stakeholders directly in future collaborative development in the Mediathread community.
Sounds good.
How's that? Okay. So, so the next thing we need to do is we need to sort of break this down into pieces. This is one of those moments where I actually wish that I had, I never say I wish I had something that Word has that I don't have here, but right now I wish that I had something that Word has. You know how you can split the screen so you can see a piece up here and work on another piece down here? Yeah. Oh well.
Yeah, if we were there with a whiteboard, it would be just just block out the pieces.
So let's actually, what I'm gonna do just to make it easier to see what I'm doing, I'm gonna throw this piece up at the top of the notes, so I can pull things down. So I'm gonna take this and repeat it here just for ease of viewing. Okay, so what are the areas we need to work on? We need to work on finding stakeholders.
Do you know the 5 institutions you want to work with, or you're going to be work with? Do you have any kind of qualitative way of determining? I mean, are you pretty clear on who they are already, or do you have to sort that out somehow?
Well, one approach would be to go to the institutions that we know have installed the software and see who was motivating that and see if we can engage that person again.
Okay. Do you know who you want to? Do you know who you want to work with?
Yeah, like are there people that you particularly like working with? It's always a good idea if you've got a selection of people you could go out to talk to. Start with the ones you actually like hanging out with anyway.
Well, I guess if we had dream collaborators, they would be institutions that had educational technology development in-house, like we do, so that we're dealing with professionals in some way. not that students and other people can't be in the mix, but it's always good when there's somebody who is actually being paid by the institution to do this kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So hold on. I want to break this down into the sections. I've got finding stakeholders, developing installation on-ramp. Maybe that should be, I'm not sure, should finding and working with stakeholders be together, or should it just be two separate things?
I think that's one thing.
You think it's one thing? Well, it's. I think that depends on the project. It's.
We may break this down into two sections in a minute. You'll see where I'm going with this, and then you'll decide if you want to split it into two pieces. Planning event to involve stakeholders directly in development. Okay, so we've got these 4 areas that we need to work on. 2 of them are actually software development, and 2 of them are people skills. One of them is a project management issue. One of them is, essentially sales in a sense. Sales and support, right? So, under finding and working closely with stakeholders, what are the sorts of things that you need to do that? One is reach out to institutions you already know have installed Mediathread, and find out which ones of those want to work with you, right?
Yeah. I think some sort of, I don't know, branding, but some sort of like announcement or of a program that has 5 partners. I don't know, I'm just talking out loud here, but it feels like if we went around and said we are looking to fill these 5 slots for this initiative that we are undertaking, it would be more cohesive and a better sell than just like, hey, you want to work with us.
Right, okay. So I put that down, announce a program that has 5 partners.
Design that program. What are you going to want them to do? What are their commitments?
Right, exactly. I mean, we know the end one is that they're going to be at the conference with us, or they're going to participate in this conference with us.
What about funding issues? Are there any significant funding questions?
You mean, do we have funds to?
All right, do you need to raise funds, or
in order to make this work, do you need more money than you have in your pocket right now?
Well, it depends on if this program involves some sort of financial incentive to really commit and an award for this work that they're doing. We don't, this is not the kind of thing that we normally do, so we don't have money sitting around for that, so we'd have to figure out how to come up with money.
I wasn't thinking in terms of an award for the work, because basically the work is its own reward. The reward is that they have this tool in their institution and people are learning things and doing academic things like that. That's their goal in life, is to accomplish these academic goals. Your tool helps them do that. So the reward here is that they have a tool that helps them do what they want to do in life, right? But I think that the area of the type of thing that might cost you money, like, is putting out an announcement going to cost you any money? Is traveling to these institutions going to cost you any money? Can you do everything online, virtually, and Skype and Hangouts, and you never have to show up at their door? Are you going to have 5 institutions that are all in easy driving distance from Columbia, so that it's not a problem to travel to them? Like
pizza and beer for the participants. That kind of thing. Yeah.
if you're having a meeting or something like that, are you going to want to have funds for that? So those are things to think about. I'm just going to put this down as consider whether there are any extra costs for this piece of the work. Travel,
Food, lodging, parking.
Parking.
You're in New York, for crying out loud. There's got
Oh, parking.
Take the subway.
parking with parks. It's New York. That's what the thingy subway's for, right?
Yeah.
I was like going through my head all the cities: Metro, Underground, No, wait, what do they call it in New York?
I mean, something like this is quite fundable, but it introduces all kinds of delay and effort to try to get a grant funding for it. But this is the kind of thing that funders often like to support, is kind of this gathering up of like-minded people to work on a project across institutions.
Right.
Okay.
Well, so here's a thought that if there are ways that you can do this with institutions that are all either close enough to you that you can avoid extraneous travel costs, or you can do all of the hand-holding through virtual means, right? Then you don't have to worry about those travel costs. But do spend some time considering that. And if you find that there are some costs that you can't avoid, and you need some help brainstorming where you can get those funds, I mean, who knows? Maybe you can even get, donors or donors or corporate sponsors to help. You can do that through us if need be. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment when we get down to the events. So I'm going to leave this section as it is at the moment. We can come back to it if we need to, but let's go to developing the installation on-ramp. What are the things that you need to do for developing the installation on-ramp?
At the very least, documentation.
Documentation.
Yeah, we have some level of it, but it's definitely geared to people who know what they're doing.
Okay.
There's also building a package of some nature that would allow people to have a one-click install.
Okay. Are there any other tasks within that?
I think those are the two big ones.
Okay. Improving user orientation to the software. Again, documentation, yes?
Yeah.
I'm going to put under documentation video lessons or video tutorials in use, because I suspect that that's probably going to be very helpful. Is there anything else under documentation? Well, written documentation, always. You can never get away from the FMs that must be AR'd. Any other tasks that should go under documentation? Maybe internal hints. You know how when you open a new app in Google, or when Google has updated an app now, they have these like little boxes that pop up that say, you can do this thing here, and then you do that thing, and then it gets another box, do this thing here. Like, do you want to put that sort of internal documentation directly into the application?
We have some of that already, but it certainly could use a refreshment improvement, I think.
Internal,
before.
what do we call that? First use hints. Okay, what else do we need to do for improving user orientation to the software?
We currently have a designer looking to find ways to maybe make it easier for users to understand how to interact with the software. But that's probably going to be an ongoing task.
I mean, internally, we have been sketching up and ramping up to do some development on a certain kind of defined assignment type that you can, a common way of using the tool. So developing some features that support that in a way that the features don't right now.
Okay.
It's a common type of assignment, which is the single item analysis assignment.
So continue work on, what did you call that assignment?
Single item analysis.
Can you have that improvement done in 6 months?
No.
It's a straight answer. I mean, I did nothing wrong with that.
We have a certain pace of our development. We are hoping to tackle this in January.
So by June, you don't think a summer release? This is a conversation that we have. People who actually know how to code and develop or push back a little bit. I am hoping that we are able to do this in the next sort of couple semester cycle.
We would be able to tell you within the next probably few weeks. We're going to be going through a planning meeting.
Okay.
Planning development for the spring.
Are there any other tasks that we should put under improving user orientation to the software? Maybe developing developing a packet that an in-person instructor could give at a university. So if a new Mediathread installation has been put up at a university, or even, say, at Columbia, you've got new students every semester or every year who are going to be using this tool. If you have an instructor at the institution who can give a 1 hour intro to the software as, just like a separate lecture that people could go to. If you guys could write that up or develop that you could hand it off to people at different universities, that might help them. Does that sound like an idea, or does that just sound like a stupid idea? It might be stupid.
So it's targeted towards someone that's going to be instructing other faculty that might consider using Mediathread, or is it actually to the end users?
Well, I mean, I was picturing it in my head as being something that was available to end users. I was imagining being a student showing up to a class and being told, you're going to have to use this tool, and then being like, oh my God, this tool is so hard, how am I ever going to learn it? And being told, don't worry, there's a 1 hour or a 2 hour seminar this Wednesday afternoon at such and such a time. If you want to learn how to use the tool, that's when we're going to cover it all.
I don't think for students using it it would take an hour seminar to learn it. I mean, I think the little video tutorials that you suggested and sort of contextual help are enough.
Okay.
It might be more useful though for instructors who are trying to wrap their minds about how would I integrate this into a curriculum? What kinds of assignments would I be doing? How would I grade stuff that comes out of there? I mean, there seems to be a lot more to mull over and talk about on that level, and I don't even know if an hour would be necessary, but I think it would be interesting to think of some sort of package of ideas or.
So how about this idea? What about a MOOC style presentation that you do? that's open-ended. So you do basically a video lecture that takes them through not just how the software works, but how to use it pedagogically, right? And how to use it within the context of their classes. And then have um, an open bulletin board system that people can use to discuss things. That could be useful for those instructors, and it can also be very useful for you, because if you read through those bulletin boards, that's free feedback for you to help you see what areas need to be improved in the future. And so I don't know what tools you guys have on hand there at Columbia, but I do know that there's an organization called Eliademy. I'll type it in the chat. Oh, wrong keyboard. Eliademy. I think it's eliademy.org. Let me check. So if you're familiar with MOOC, with Moodle, Eliademy is based on Moodle. Looks like it's .com. So, no, it's gone. I can't find it.
We're on the site.
L-I...
Eliademy.
Eliademy.
E-L...
IADEMY.
E-M-Y. Is it .org?
.com.
.com. That makes more sense. So yeah, it's built on Moodle. It allows you to upload videos. It allows you to have course conversations, and it's totally free. So free for you, free for the end users. Everybody's happy, yay. And that might be a tool that you guys could use to put up some instruction for instructors. Does that make sense? Like, it's just...
Yeah, that's a nice. Thank you for pointing that out to us. We have sort of put up a site kind of outside of Columbia, Mediathread.info, which is Drupal. I mean, it's just a sort of a pushing out information site. So we don't want too many different public properties. So we'd have to think about how that would fit into, how something like this would fit into what we already have up there. But I mean, I think generally it's a great idea to have one place where the tutorials are, where some like greater discussion, deeper discussion about how to use why you would use the tool and how people are doing it, and where people can easily comment and post feedback.
So one thought is, if you've already got a Drupal site up, you could also, there is a Moodle for Drupal module, and you could pull that in, or there's also the forums for Drupal module
Right.
that you use. So I mean, these are just different tools for the same purpose.
Right.
The point being, like, if you have some instruction for instructors on how to use the tool within context, and then a space for them to have these conversations, like, I just think that would be really helpful for them and for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Okay. Gonna put that. So moving on to planning the event. So we're at 11:32. Do you guys have to go?
We're gonna lose this room.
We may have to go quite soon. So.
Okay, so I will leave the planning event for right this moment. But what you can see that we've done here so far is we've taken your single statement, like this is what we want to accomplish, and we've started to break it down into tasks that need to be done. And now you can take those tasks that need to be done and you can actually put them out on a calendar. Literally sitting with a paper calendar in front of you and putting them down is, tactily very satisfying, and somehow, in my experience, really helps the brain work. You can do it in the form of like a PERT chart or a Gantt chart that you just do on
big roll of butcher paper.
Yeah, a big roll of butcher paper. Or you can do it with a bunch of Post-it notes on a wall or something like that. Take these tasks that need to be done, stick them under weeks, organize your time by weeks, and say we need to get this done by this time. We need to get started on this here, and it'll be finished by here. And then once you've done that sort of tactily, then you can take a picture of it and digitize it, or you can have somebody put it all into your calendar or your project management tool or whatever. And now you've got a really solid sense of what you need to go forward. And anytime somebody says, hey, we should really do this, the first thing you should say is, does that thing fit within this 6-month goal?
What we're trying to do, yeah.
If it doesn't fit into this target, then no, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
unless you realize when you see that, you're like, oh, our target is wrong. We need to get back to the table and rethink our target. But
generally speaking,
if it doesn't fit your target, the answer is no. So you just let all those other things that don't fit this very concise statement, just let those things fall by the wayside and just keep pushing forward for the things that actually fit your target.
You should find that your workload actually shrinks from doing this rather than increases.
So we do have, limited resources, unfortunately. Susan's kind of like the development team. So I think we might have to actually do some prioritization.
Right.
That's fine. Absolutely.
I mean, that's really the process of putting things, whether it's on a wall or butcher paper or whatever, having that physical tactile experience of saying, these are the things we need to do, how do we prioritize them on a calendar, will help you to figure out, can we make these targets, how are we going to make these targets, if there are more tasks that you need to do to meet this target, how do you put them in? In 2 weeks when we talk, I'd love to see the work that you've done on that. And if what you find is that, like, oh my God, you've got way more stuff than you guys could possibly accomplish, which I actually don't, I'll be surprised if that happens. But if it does happen, then our next talk should be, how do we get you more support from those other institutions, and how do we get more developer support from outside your group? Okay?
Yep.
Sounds great.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Weekend over the holidays. Wishing you guys happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays. So I'm not sure. I think that our next scheduled meeting is during the holidays, actually. Yeah. Okay, so our next scheduled meeting is actually on New Year's Eve. I declare that canceled.
Go to the next one after that.
The question is,
Well, New Year's Day might not be a good idea either.
right, New Year's Day is obviously not a good idea. So do you guys want to meet on the 7th, and we'll meet on the 7th and then the 14th, and then we'll get back to our regular schedule?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll do that then.
All right, great.
Great. Thanks,
Great.
you guys.
Thanks.
Happy
That's good.
holidays.
Happy holidays.
Bye.